This story's about a place where moonlight squeezes through the bars of a cage, a grim cell where the air was stale and a bone-chilling draft crept up from the basement. In that place, a truly terrifying dude was sinking his sharp teeth into his victim's neck. The girl in his grip fought back, but he kept biting her arms as she tried to fend him off. And this messed up situation was how young Lady Lenatus's 20th birthday started. Just before all that, she was strolling in the garden when she heard Amiel calling her name. He came running up, totally winded, and blurted out that he'd been looking for her forever. She was surprised he was looking for her, not Estelle, but Amiel said he doesn't have to only look for her. Then, he held out a ribbon, a present for her birthday tomorrow. Amiel bought a similar ribbon for Estelle too, but the whole gift thing was just a cover story. This shy kid's a farmer's son, and honestly, he's a really sweet and nice guy. But Lenatus was pissed that he was hitting on her sister, who she loved to death and wasn't about to hand over. The guy didn't get her reaction. It's not just some object, it's a real person, you know? Then, Amiel noticed the bag in Lenatus's hands, and she explained she was taking it to her Aunt Lancide, so he offered to carry it himself. That way she could go enjoy lunch with Estella. Didn't take much convincing. Lenatus just tossed him the bag, which turned out to be heavy as hell and almost made him drop. She just told him to deliver it safe and sound, and then said goodbye. And she even flirted with him a little and flashed her amazing smile. Lenatus was just an ordinary girl, except super strong, and she lived in a quiet little village. Her mom died when she was a baby, and she was raised by her grumpy dad. But she had a good life. Their village was full of good people, not rich, but everyone had enough food to live a good life. Lenatus also had the most beautiful and kind older sister, named Estella. She was always digging in the dirt, but she loved it, even now, when Lenatus came to see her. Estella practically became a mother to her little sister, raising her and giving her the best upbringing. Even as a kid, she started working in the fields, and she found food in the mountains and the forest. Lenatus was always grateful to her sister for raising her, and now she brought her an apple, offering to share it after lunch. Estella was the most important person in her sister's life, so she didn't want to give her to Amiel. Tomorrow she'll be an adult and able to do all sorts of work and help her sister support the family. Lenatus only had a couple of minutes left until her 20th birthday, until the clock struck midnight. And as soon as the chimes rang out, the girl suddenly felt very strange. She couldn't shake that scene from the dark cell, the one where they were really roughing her up. She'd been through it enough times to know what was coming next. This disturbingly handsome dude was obsessed with her, thought she was some kind of sorceress driving him nuts. And this girl was Estella, and right at the peak of it all, Lenatus heard her sister calling out, all freaked out. Estella thought something was wrong, and she started to get worried. Her sis said she had a headache, but the truth was, she was remembering something. She was actually living in the world from that novel she used to read, back in her old life. The whole messed up story kicked off with the male lead going totally bonkers. Archduke Kerio. He's the heir to the Kerio family, where all the adults, and sometimes even the kids, eventually lose their minds. The madness would eventually fade, but until then, it ran wild, and a lot of people died or got killed. The only way to chill him out was by drinking a witch's blood or saliva. Lenatus couldn't figure out how she even got hooked on reading crap like this in her past life. What really pissed her off was finding all this out on her 20th birthday. Someone could have fed her this info bit by bit. In the garden, she saw these radishes all grown together, like they were hugging, and for some reason, that just set Lenatus off. Seeing her stomping that weird plant into the ground, Estella and Amiel started getting worried about her, but she just kept slapping the dirt, furious that they crammed the whole damn novel into her head in one morning. Just then, Estella came over and, wondering if she was okay, touched her forehead to check her temperature. Her temperature was fine, but Estella still told Lenatus to ditch work for the day and just relax. The truth was, Lenatus felt sick because she realized her older sister was going to be the heroine in that trashy novel. She'd be giving her blood to the main character day and night and end up a victim of his craziness. So, in the end, stuck in a cold basement with failing eyesight, she's going to check out of this world, and that's the end of the story. The end of Estella Crastia's life of suffering, and Lenatus decided she was going to stop that tragedy from happening. Turning to her sister, she announced that she wanted something special for her birthday. Estella guessed she wanted cake, and maybe a picnic by the lake, but she was totally shocked when Lenatus asked her to run away with her lover. Meanwhile, while she was busy trying to rewrite the novel, back at Archduke Kerio's estate, that dude was straight up losing his mind. You could see animal fangs in his mouth when he sighed, and he kept calling out for the sorceress. A week had passed since Lenatus asked her sister to run, but Estella was still saying no. They both knew exactly what running away with her lover meant, and what the consequences would be. But Lenatus wouldn't give up. She kept hounding her, even whispering it to her in her sleep. What really ticked her off was that her older sister wouldn't listen to her and run away with Emil. I mean, she totally loves him, but Estella kept arguing, saying they weren't even like that. And she figured her little sister had nothing better to do, asking her to go do something useful. But once Lenatus got her memories back from her past life, she finally understood what was really going on with her sister. Turns out, she's head over heels for Emil, even if he ain't pretty, got no money, and everyone thinks he's beneath her. In the original story, Estella was stuck in a dark basement, crying her eyes out because she missed Emil so much. She just couldn't accept her fate as a prisoner of the crazy main dude, who happened to be rich and gorgeous. And now, Estella was refusing to run off with Emil because she was also worried about her little sister being left all alone. Lenatus swore she could get a job as a maid in a rich house, even though she had no references. But she's super strong, and that's exactly the kind of maid they need, and those people won't find anyone better. Girl even lifted a pile of huge rocks to show her sister how strong she was, even though she already knew. All that was left was to play the victim, so she sat down and started crying, worrying her sister all over again. Estella comforted her as best she could, but told her to drop the subject. She wanted to explain something else to her younger sister, but their conversation was cut short. The door creaked open, and a not-so-young man walked in, head hanging low, a bottle in his hand. The girls got scared and on edge because it was their dad, and it looked like he was plastered. Stumbling forward, the man kept trying to take swigs from the bottle, but he was spilling booze everywhere. He was wobbly on his feet and pissed that his daughters weren't happy to see him, so he started calling them names. Estella immediately shielded her sister, explaining they were just busy with dinner, then greeted him. Sadly, this mean drunk was their father, and when he was like this, he often went after them with his fists. The girls figured out he'd already blown all the cash he'd shaken them down for a few days ago. Dad caught Lenatus giving him the stink eye and immediately started laying into her, pissed that she wasn't bringing home any bacon. He was convinced she'd lost all respect the second he walked in the door and chucked a bottle at her. Estella stepped in before he could escalate, promising she'd talk to her sister and begging him to chill. That calmed him down a little, but he kept grumbling that he was only wasting money on booze because of Lenatus. Once he was gone, she finally let the tears flow, her body still shaking from fear and anxiety. Estella noticed her sister's state right away and rushed over to help, but she insisted she was fine and unhurt. She was just worried about something else. She didn't get why her older sister wanted to spend her whole life taking a beating from their dad. They got lucky and got away with it today, but things could have easily ended with a black eye. After a few seconds of thought, Estella suggested they both run away from this horrible guy. But Dad doesn't make a dime, and if they leave together, he'll definitely come after them. That really freaked out her older sister, but Lenatus kept begging her to run, promising the separation wouldn't be long. In a week, she could sneak back and see if Lenatus got a job as a maid, and if not, then they'd both leave together. The younger sister admitted it was hard for her to work up the courage to even ask for something like that, but she asked Estella to be brave with her, and then they'd definitely make it work. The girls hugged, and that very night, Estella, just like her sister asked, quickly packed her stuff. In the dead of night, the two of them went to see Amiol, which surprised him a lot. But seeing the bag, he quickly caught on, because for the past few days, Lenatus had been pressuring him too, with the idea of escaping. This guy turned out to be way better than she initially thought. He immediately started looking out for her sister. They started saying their goodbyes, and Estella said that Lenatus would always be her baby sister. She knew it would be rough, and told her to text anytime. In the novel, Estella agrees to hit the road to protect her little sis. That girl always lived for Lenatus, shielding her from their dad. So Lenatus wanted her to be happy. And to make it happen, she decided to take on the bitter fate that was meant for her older sister. Saying goodbye, the girls hugged, wishing each other luck and telling each other to stay safe. After that, Estella and Emil started their journey, and Lenatus watched them go for a while. Alone, the girl finally gave in to her inner turmoil and sat down, because her legs were shaking. But the important thing is, her sister is now safe, and now she has a really important job to do herself. Lenatus was now determined to throw her dad in jail, so he could pay for his sins. Truth is, Dad didn't really hate Estella. She just caught flack because she was always around Lenatus. It was the younger daughter he really hated, because she was a dead ringer for their mom. Mom died right after giving birth to her second kid, and unlike her sister, Lenatus doesn't even remember her face. But none of that mattered to her anymore. Back home, Lenatus managed to lock her old man in his own room, which, yeah, pissed him off good. He'd been out cold all night, then woke up raging, not understanding why the door wouldn't budge. According to the plot, today was the day someone was supposed to show up and knock on their beat-up door. And when Lenatus went to answer it, just like she expected, there was some young dude with a monocle. This guy, the Duke's assistant, was looking for a girl with pink hair. and he couldn't believe she was in this dump. Lenatus already knew why he was there, and she also noticed how he started checking her out. Turns out pink hair is like super rare in this world. Even though she knew her hair was special before losing her novel memories, it actually has magical charm powers. Then this guy showed up, said his name was Ordi Eikol, and that he works for the Duke. In the novel, he took the main character hostage and forced her, with threats, to go with him to the Archduke. Lenatus wasn't surprised to see him on her doorstep, but she did ask why Archduke Kerio sent him. The dude asked to talk for a bit and wanted her to come with him, which is when her dad started screaming, just cursing and calling his daughters names, saying they'd pay for what they did. The girl felt kinda awkward. Honestly, she'd have preferred it if her dad was asleep right now. She explained to her guests that it was just her father, and he shouldn't pay him any mind. But Ordi figured out the screaming guy was locked up, and that his yelling was clearly bothering Lenatus. She was straight up with her guest, though, telling him her dad gets a little crazy when he drinks. But Ordi didn't seem to care less. He had his own agenda, and he laid it out for the girl, telling her she needed to go after him to the Archduke's estate. This was exactly what Lenatus wanted, and now she could play it cool, like she was surprised. Then, after stalling for time, acting like she was weighing her options, the girl agreed. Now she's heading to Archduke Kerio's estate, not even bothering to pack for the trip. When they arrived, she asked Ordi to hang back, said she just remembered something and needed to figure it out. In the novel, Estella's first meeting with the main character happened in a tiny room, but the place they took her looked more like some kind of underground prison. Plus, 2 guards armed with spears were sticking to them like glue. Ordi blew off the girl's question and just reminded her she's got one job. Lenatus was thrown for a loop, but realized how freaked out Estelle must have been, walking in here blind. The dungeon wasn't even mentioned until the second half of the novel, but this could just be a normal room, right? Trying to calm herself down, she suddenly had an idea, but then she got shoved into the corner of the cell. Naturally, she was pissed, but Ordi just repeated that she had one damn job. She needs to chill out some dude who's locked up in this dungeon. Then the assistant and the guards left and locked the door behind them, leaving her completely alone. Lenatus immediately started banging on the door, demanding some time to prep for the meeting. But nobody answered, and then she heard another door creak open quietly behind her. Lenatus could only be here in her sister's place for one reason, because she isn't her sister. Estella and she only had the hair color in common. They were totally different in every other way. Different eyes, different personalities. Plus Lenatus is a brawler, and the Duke probably won't dig that, which means he won't fall for her, he won't get obsessed, and she's heading for a bad ending. People's tastes don't just change like that. She's into the ripped dudes who can chop a log in half with one swing. But all the guys in her village were sadly weaker than her. They could barely lift 4 sacks at once. One day, Lenatus even jokingly yelled out the window, calling for her monster-strong boyfriend. But that didn't mean she actually wanted a guy who was a monster, and who just happened to be walking into the room at that moment, which totally freaked her out. She knew he was the Archduke, but right now, he looked like some terrifying beast. This guy, the Archduke's heir, the main character of the novel, Theodore Kerio. Of course, he was totally out of his mind at this exact moment, and Lenatus felt her stomach drop. Then she remembered that Theodore had come on pretty strong to Estella when they first met. Like, he straight up attacked her, and now the Archduke was doing the same thing, scaring Lenatus half to death. In the novel, Estella was thrown off by how his beautiful face clashed with his crazy, bloodshot eyes. And while she was totally bewildered, Theodore came right up to her. After that, he pounced, sinking his teeth into her neck, and just started sucking her blood. Knowing how the story goes, Lenatus jumped back the second the Archduke looked like he was about to attack. She realized with horror that she'd almost just been eaten, like literally, and it made her skin crawl. Theodore only managed to scratch her arm, but she wasn't too worried about it. And now he was standing by the door, chewing on a piece of bloody cloth, and his head slowly turned towards her. Out of nowhere, he says his prisoner smells sweet, but it sounded like it came straight from hell. But the fact he was talking meant he was awake, and Lenatus wasn't about to waste the opening. Putting on her sweetest face, she begged him to just talk to her, for starters. He just growled, still a monster, wanting to pounce again, but Lenatus started to back away. Except this is a tiny cell, there's nowhere to hide, and she can't keep running forever. She needed to get a grip. And then she remembered Emil's words about how when you meet a predator, you can't turn your back or even think about running. You gotta look him right in the eye and just slowly back away, putting more distance between you. But the most important thing is to look at the predator like you ain't scared at all, even if it's tough. Lenatus decided to give it a shot, and turning to face the Archduke, she glared at him fiercely. And it actually worked, which even surprised her, because the monster seemed a little thrown off, and she started backing away slowly. Guess there's no such thing as a hopeless situation. All she had to do was wait for his guys to show up. Just then, Lenatus slipped and started falling backwards, and Theodore lunged at her. The girl's whole body jumped again in fear when she realized Emil's advice hadn't worked. At that moment, a few drops of her blood hit the cold stone floor, but Lenatus managed to throw her hands out, and she grabbed Theodore's arm with one, and her other hand ended up in the path of his jaws, and he sunk his fangs into it. The girl was terrified. She could hear him greedily gulping down her blood, and those gulps echoed off the cold walls. Lenatus barely had time to say goodbye to her sister in her head, realizing she was going to die such a stupid death. But then she felt the Archduke's bite start to weaken. The girl was totally thrown off, confused why he was getting so calm all of a sudden. I mean, Theodore's supposed to be the main dude who's gone crazy, acting like a total monster. In the novel, he jumps the heroine to get his fix. That's all he cares about. But now, with Lenatus this close, she could see the little cuts around his mouth. She spotted broken fingernails on his hands. He's clearly been clawing at the walls, fighting his madness. Lenatus now felt like this guy had been suffering alone, and it suddenly reminded her of her childhood. Her dad would lock her in the dark closet, and she'd beg forgiveness, just wanting to be let out. It was dark and terrifying. The little girl's tears wouldn't stop, and she kept calling for her sister. She remembered all this because the Theodore standing in front of her wasn't the guy from the novel. Just like her back then, he was trapped in a dark place, completely alone. He was just a kid who'd lost his mom, so Lenatus figured she'd try being a little gentle with him. While he was still sucking blood from her hand, she wrapped her arms around his neck, telling him to calm down, that it didn't hurt. She didn't even know why she did that at the time, and even thought Theodore had hypnotized her with his eyes. But they stayed like that for a while. Then Lenatus realized he'd just gone still. She figured he'd just fallen asleep or passed out, and tried calling out to him. But the dude just gently slumped to the floor, looked like the beast inside him calmed down from her blood. But in the novel, he tormented Estelle until dawn, until she was the one passing out. And now, he's calmed down and fallen asleep after just a little taste of blood. Lenatus noticed a few other differences too. She even wondered if she'd gotten the genre wrong. And just then, a pink blob appeared in the chamber. The girl didn't notice it right away, because she was lost in thought, staring at the Archduke's cute face. But when that tuber started talking to her, Lenatus's hair stood on end like she'd seen a ghost. She was so freaked out. It was like some character who totally wandered into the wrong kind of story. There was zero mention of magical creatures or monsters in the doll Kerio novel. The Kerio family had suffered from madness for generations, and when it showed, a person's eyes would glow red. It might have seemed like magic and curses existed in this world because of that, but the book never talked about it. But now, right in front of Lenatus, was this weird pink tuber with eyes and a mouth. And then the girl realized it was a slime, but from the tuber's reaction, it was clear she hated that name. She explained that she belonged to the highest order of magical beings, and a nickname like that really ticked her off. A totally shocked Lenatus distinctly remembered the description of such a creature from her past life, and it was definitely a slime. But she still decided to ask the tuber what she could call her, so she wouldn't get angry. The bulb smiled and introduced herself as a Skyan, but that wasn't enough info for the girl. She kept pressing, trying to figure out what kind of being this Skyan was. She apologized for the interrogation, then explained that she was human and her name was Lenatus Gracia. When she asked what a Skyan was, the cell went silent for a sec. The girl was now convinced it was a slime, and the dungeon immediately filled with Skyan's outrage. To clear things up, Lenatus asked what kind of magical creature it actually was, and what race they belonged to. No answer. The bulb just kept repeating that she wasn't a slime, she was a scene. Pissed off, she declared that she wasn't getting anywhere with this human, and turned to leave. The girl felt a little bad about the awkwardness. She hadn't meant to offend the creature. Gently lowering the Archduke's head from her lap, she decided to catch up with the bulb. But when she glanced back over there, the creature was already gone. Lenatus sighed heavily, remembering she wanted to tweak the plot a bit, but it looked like she changed it way too much. A little while back, the Archduke woke up in his study, and his throat immediately felt like it was on fire. He coughed hard and started calling for help right away, because he felt like total crap. When Theodore looked up, he saw his father sitting nearby, silently watching him. Then, his father got up and demanded his son not lose his mind and to remember how his older brother died. Theodore had to hold it together if he didn't want to end up the same way. He was strictly forbidden from killing the sorceress, and that was the last thing he heard from his father before he lost it. And it didn't sound like advice a father gives his son out of concern or a warning. The elder Archduke just coldly delivered a warning that was basically an order. Theodore knew damn well his dad didn't have any warm feelings for him. He'd never heard a kind word from the guy, but for some reason, he was hoping this time would be different. But that was just a side effect of being freaked out by the fangs suddenly popping out and the pain from the long claws. They were family, and his dad had gone through this before. but he didn't even tell his son the pain would pass. Theodore really wanted to hear those words right then, but it was stupid to expect it. The Duke figured he'd be better off dead, and now he was asleep, dreaming of a girl's voice. She was saying she wasn't in pain, and for some reason, it was calming him down. Theodore woke up in his room, though he didn't immediately realize where he was. Plus, he felt like he wasn't hurting anymore, and that's when his worried assistant came over. He immediately started asking how he was feeling, and Theodore noticed his fangs were gone, and his hands were working fine. Theodore figured that sorceress was behind this, and immediately started asking where she was. Looking a little guilty, Orty explained they just left her in the cell, because they didn't know what else to do with her. All of a sudden, the Archduke bolted out of bed and ran for the door, scaring the crap out of his aide. He freaked out, because he might have drunk too much of her blood, since he was totally losing it back then. For some reason, he was really scared he might have hurt her too badly, and throwing open the cell door, he saw the pink-haired girl standing with her back to him. Theodore was slightly taken aback, and Lenatus explained she was waiting for him to ask why he was tormenting her like this. They dragged her in here, promising a place to sleep and food. But she's just a dog in a cage. It's super uncomfortable sleeping on the stone floor, and the moldy air is just impossible to breathe. Then she started yelling even louder, saying even prisoners are supposed to get food at least twice a day. The Duke was totally stunned. He even wondered if this girl had bumped her head or something. Lenatus just blew a fuse. She was furious that someone would force another person to starve. They'd only taken Master Theodore from her this morning and left her in this freezing basement. And if she died of hunger here, she wouldn't be able to help him anymore. In a fit of rage, and with the dim lighting, the girl didn't immediately recognize who had come to her. And when he started talking about how she was unhappy with a lot of things, his voice sounded like your typical pretty boy. Calming down a little, she looked closer and saw that Duke Theodore himself was standing before her. She'd figured his assistant would come for her, but for some reason, the young master had come in person. Plus, he looks way better. His eyes are back to a normal color, so it seems like he's finally snapped out of it. While she was checking him out, Duke Theodore asked why she had suddenly gone silent. But then he realized it himself. She'd probably never seen a monster like him before. Just last night, she saw him as a kid, lost and far from home, like a fragile, glowing ember in a dark forest. So fragile, in fact, that Lenatus, without even realizing it, tried to protect him. But that look he's got now, it's like a teenager acting out, and if you handle him wrong, things will get ugly fast. Theodore figured the girl was silent because she was terrified, but thinking like that could turn him into the bad guy. The girl didn't want him going down that dark path and blurted out that last night, he was just like a bunny. The Archduke didn't get what his captive was implying, but then she realized she'd messed up too. In romance novels, the main characters are usually like predators. Lenatus immediately started apologizing to Lord Theodore and took back what she said about the rabbit. It's just that rabbits also have red eyes, but they're not scary at all. They're actually super cute. So she thought the dude was kinda cute too, which Theo found weird to hear. Girls totally tripping over her words. The Archduke's not just cute, he's straight up gorgeous. Plus, as soon as he started feeling better, he suddenly looked like he walked right out of a novel. Now he's giving her this predatory look, and his still raspy voice is just making him even hotter. But Lenatus was glad Theo wasn't her type, cause she's into those big puppy dog guys who wag their tails. While she was thinking they were a mismatch, the Duke asked her to explain what she did to him last night. But Lenatus fired back with the same question, pointing to the wound on her arm where he drank blood. Theo heard she had no other wounds and was surprised, and she realized he didn't remember anything because he was out of it. Though he might be wondering how she ended up completely fine after all that, this wasn't good, because if he started suspecting her, he wouldn't trust her. He can go chase after some other pink-haired chick, specifically the one named Estella Grazia, and Lenatus went to all that trouble to convince her sister to escape, so she could live a better life far from here. Then she started racking her brain, trying to remember how the main character acted in the novel after the hero drank her blood. Remembering that she fainted, Lenatus started acting like she felt sick, like her head was spinning, all while saying that the Duke drank way too much of her blood last night, and it really weakened her. Now it was time to faint. But the girl was a little fuzzy on how to do it right, probably just enough to fall. And suddenly, she was crashing onto the floor with a bang. She banged her ankle when she fell, but she needed to suck it up and not make a sound, even though it hurt like hell. She couldn't let on that she was faking, and Theodore just stood there silently, probably buying it. Then, Lenatus heard him order the servants to carry the prisoner to her room. Girl was patting herself on the back for her acting skills, almost ashamed she's stuck in this basement. Peeking through a tiny crack in her eyelids, Lenatus checked out the shoes, then pretended to wake up. The Archduke was squatting right in front of her, begging her to wake up, and she just straight up said she wanted to walk around. And then she bolted out of the cell, though who knows what the heck she was thinking. Theodore couldn't figure out how she bounced back so fast that she could actually run. It shouldn't be possible after a night in a basement with a monster like him, but he didn't think she was faking it. That's when he remembered telling her, while she was still passed out, that she should get up if she had any conscience, and realized this girl definitely can't fake it, but he actually found it kind of funny. Theodore was even glad he hadn't hurt her, at least not seriously. Still, he knew that for a girl who'd been thrown in a dungeon, things probably looked totally different. Lenatus wasn't planning on running from the estate, and they wouldn't have let her anyway. But she did get her own room. The bed was so soft, she almost forgot she'd spent the night in a dungeon. She left with Theodore from there, and Orty took her to the guest room where she's gonna be living now. The room was so huge, it was bigger than her whole house back home. With all this luxury, Lenatus even forgot to complain. Everything was made of expensive stuff, plus they fed her and treated her arm. A little later, they brought Lenatus a really pretty dress. Even though it was a maid's uniform, Orty assigned her to serve as a maid for the young duke. Her duties also include serving the master tea, but mainly she has to calm his fits of madness. And she's got to accept that she needs to wear the uniform all the time, because the master's condition is a secret. But she was just thrilled with the dress, which kinda surprised Orty. Even though this situation worked for him, Lenatus would never forget the way he looked at her, like she was a total idiot. She absolutely loved the ribbon and the puffy sleeves on the dress. Plus, it was made of this gorgeous, soft fabric. She couldn't understand why anyone wouldn't want to wear it, especially since she only had 2 new dresses herself. Her mom made the first one ages ago, and her sister made the second, after buying beautiful fabric. Both were birthday gifts. And that second dress was exactly what she was wearing now, covered in bloodstains, dust, and dirt, and ripped in a few places too. She'd put it on to look presentable for Theodore, because it was the best thing she owned. And now Orty was insisting she throw it away, but Lenatus refused, because her sister would be furious. Estella was supposed to be in this room originally, lying unconscious on the bed. The family doctor would be leaning over her, looking super worried about her weak condition. Right now, Estella should be perfectly fine with Emuel, and Lenatus was really hoping she was okay. Clutching her new uniform, the girl kept thinking about her sister for a while longer. Tears welled up in her eyes against her will, and that pink slime showed up again, clueless why she was crying. Just then, Lenatus felt the tear that had gathered in the corner of her eye just vanish. That surprised her, and so did the fact that the slime got into the room in some weird way. But he reminded her he was from a magical lineage, and for the great Skian, doors are no obstacle. Then Lenatus realized that this creature could teleport. She figured that since there are monsters in this world, there might be magic too. Right away, Lenatus asked if Skin could teleport her to her sister for even just a second. Putting on a serious face, the pink blob declared that it was impossible. Figuring it was because of yesterday's conversation, the girl apologized for her behavior. But she really needed to get to her sister. Then she started asking what the reason for the refusal was, even thinking it might be some kind of magic limitation. Maybe she got rejected, because she ain't the main character, when all of a sudden, Skian admits he's got no clue how to do this. Lenatus was totally bummed. Things weren't adding up. How the heck did that slime get in here anyway? So, he explains he squeezed through a crack in the door. Being small has its perks, you know? But now, that throws his whole great magical lineage thing into question. Turns out, he's just a regular slime, who then confessed he was following a sweet scent. That was weird, because there weren't any sweets around, but that same scent led the slime to her yesterday too. Now he's figuring that the smell is actually coming from the pink-haired girl. He was so into the smell that he just hopped right onto Lenatia's lap without even asking. Skian totally ignored her questions, just kept repeating how amazing the aroma was. That's when she remembered Duke Theodore saying something similar to her last night. That smell coming off her. Probably only things that aren't human can pick it up. She racked her brain, trying to remember if the novel mentioned anything about scents. Then the slime started wriggling around and just grooving on her lap, like a little kitten. In that moment, she thought it was unbelievably cute, like almost terrifyingly so. And that nice moment got totally ruined by the slime suddenly offering to serve him. That instantly pissed her off, and she flung the thing away. It stuck to the door like splattered snot. Sliding down, Skian started whining about how being his servant was a super high honor. But Lenatus wasn't buying it. So the slime just came clean, admitting he really wanted to be close to whatever was giving off that amazing smell. That's why he offered to have her serve him, so she'd be around all the time. But that just made Lenatus even angrier. It would make her feel like some kind of plaything for this creature. She couldn't believe someone would even suggest that. Then she remembered he wasn't someone. Her fury only intensified when Sijin added that he'd support her. Her stubborn refusal made her seem like a real pain to the creature, so he asked what she suggested then. Lenatus proposed they just be friends. Friends can visit each other whenever they want, right? A smile stretched across the slime's face with every split second. But he couldn't grasp how a human dared to suggest that. Still, he appreciated Lenatus's guts and agreed to accept her offer. A little while later, a servant knocked on young Master Theodore's office door. He held out an envelope, explaining that Lenatus Gracia had asked him to deliver the letter urgently. She'd scribbled it down real quick as Ordi was leaving the room and managed to hand it to him. Both men started reading what was written, but the meaning of the text struck them as totally bizarre. Plus, the Archduke thought the text was way too long to have been written in a hurry. Lenatus started by saying she had a couple of questions for him, and first she wanted to know how long he'd been crazy. She also asked if there were any symptoms before an episode, like, did his eyes hurt or his teeth itch? She even asked how long the episode lasted, all so she could be properly prepared for their meeting. Lenatus ended by begging him to reply to the letter, and while Theodore was reading, Ordi was losing it over her nerve. What pissed him off the most was that the girl dared to call the master insane. Theodore himself figured this prisoner was definitely out of her mind, especially since she drew weird symbols at the end. It only dawned on Lenatus later that hardly anyone in this world would know about that symbol. Slime just started mocking her stupidity, but she was more worried about the fact that her hand at the bite mark was starting to hurt. Maybe the painkiller wore off, although Lenatus might just still be running on adrenaline. I mean, they sank their fangs into her arm to drink her blood. It's a miracle she even toughed it out. That's when Lenatus noticed the slime was actually worried about her, which totally caught her off guard. The little dude even looked sad. So she started trying to reassure him, saying it didn't hurt at all. It reminded her of that time her dad chucked a stool at her, and she broke it with her arm trying to block it. That was way worse. But she powered through, so this bite was nothing, really. Skian jumped back onto her lap, thinking she was faking, and tried to pet her hand. Lenatus tried to pull him off, but then she kinda liked how he stretched like soft, squishy stress ball. For a while, she just kneaded and stretched him. It helped her chill out, and even made the pain seem less intense. Still, she was worried that if Theodore had another episode, she'd have to offer up her other arm. She didn't want to be in pain all the time, so she needed to figure out a different solution, ASAP. Suddenly, she had this genius idea to prep blood beforehand and store it in a bag, like a blood donation. But there's no way they have that kind of tech here. This is a fantasy world with monsters, not modern medicine. Gotta come up with another plan. And Lenatus started racking her brain, trying to remember the novel. Later on in the story, the main character started sharing fluids in a different way. And instead of pain, she gradually started feeling pleasure. This different way was that the heroine became Duke Kerio's doll. No way Lenatus was doing that. Theodore wasn't her type, and she was sure to end up with some tall, ripped dude in the future. She needed to find a different fluid, something easy to share. So Lenatus decided to experiment on the slime, suggesting he drink someone's tears. With utter disgust and outrage, Xian declared he'd kill anyone who tried to make him do that. Next up, Lenatus suggested drinking a little sweat. But if you force a slime to drink that stuff, he'll kill your ass twice over. That's when she figured out nobody'd be down with that. And that's when Skion realized this chick was trying to get him drunk on her tears and sweat. But Lenatus totally ignored his rant and kept brainstorming, still trying to decide between sweat or tears, since the slime only threatened to kill her. Once for tears. The slime got super bored being ignored and decided to bail. Then Lenatus remembered her sister, and how parting with her recently was the saddest thing ever. The creak of a door and footsteps snapping her out of it. She turned her head and saw Duke Theodore himself standing there, giving her this weird look. The girl freaked the hell out, not knowing why he was there, and even thought she was about to have an attack. So, the truth is, Theodore just popped in to see if she was all right. She wasn't answering the door, and it was cracked open anyway. He remembered Ordi's story about how messed up things were back at her place. Their house was way out on the edge of the village, a real dump falling apart. The furniture and everything inside wasn't great either. Ordi said the lady lived with her sister and a drunk dad. But when he got there, the dad was locked up alone in his room, and nobody knew where the sister was. She also mentioned that the dress she wore to the estate meant a lot to her. And now Theodore was checking out that very dress, which looked more like a rag now. He couldn't figure out why she cared about it so much. Then it hit him that he might have ripped it up that night. Right now, he noticed her face was a little puffy, guessed she'd been crying, and wondered why. Actually, Lenatus was prepping a dose to slip him later, but there's no way she could tell him that right now. She just said she was thinking about her family and got really sad, which honestly wasn't a lie. Remembering her dad's a drunk, Theodore figured it wasn't about him, so she was crying about her sister. Sounds like they were super close, and he realized the dress she cherishes was a gift from her sister. Meanwhile, Lenatus was freaking out, not knowing why the Duke was standing there silently, like he'd seen right through her plan. She was trying to come up with some excuse when suddenly, Theodore reached out and wiped a tear from her eye. Leaning in a little, he admitted he was worried about how she was doing. The girl froze, completely thrown off. Everything in her head was a mess now. It felt like that moment, when he touched her face, stretched on forever. At the same time, she was scared the Archduke had figured out her plan to feed him her tears. But if it's not that, then she doesn't get why he's worried. Even though main characters are always perceptive, now Lenatus was lost, not sure what to do. She even thought about apologizing, even though Theodore's suspicions weren't confirmed yet. The easiest thing to do right now was play dumb, so she just asked him what he was doing here. Then she brought up the letter she sent through Ordi and wondered if the Duke had gotten it. Theodore admitted he received it, but it raised some questions for him. He pulled the letter out of his pocket, and a wave of fear washed over her. She might have written something unforgivable, but then the Archduke pointed to some weird squiggles and symbols, wondering what they were. Lenatus explained they were smileys. She even showed him what it looked like on her face, squinting her eyes. But Theodore was still a little confused. Lenatus, in that moment, was seeing the face of a guy who just completely didn't get it for the first time in her life. Still, she was glad they'd switched topics and completely forgotten about the tears. Then Theodore pulled a pouch of money from his pocket. Enough for a new dress. This is supposed to make up for wrecking the outfit Lenatus is wearing right now. The Duke straight up admitted he knows how much that dress means to her, so he went overboard with the cash. Judging by the pouch, there's gotta be around 2 million lun in there, and she's saying the dress isn't worth that much. This money could buy not just a better dress, but like 20 seriously fancy dresses. Plus, that amount is twice her salary, and her family could live off it for 2 whole months. Lenatus couldn't take that much money, thinking it might be a trap, and said it was way too much. But Theodore just said, you can't put a price on something that's close to your heart. His words sounded genuine, and Lenatus gratefully said she'd accept the compensation. At the same time, she thought about putting it in savings, so later she could live happily with her sister. And after that gift, the Archduke was hoping his captive wouldn't be sad enough to cry anymore. The girl was genuinely thrilled to get that huge chunk of cash, and thanked him again. Theodore even liked seeing the haughty smile now, even though she'd just been crying. She seemed like a total mystery to him now, like anything could happen, and he still remembered her calling him Cute Bunny. After the Archduke gave her 2 million lun, the girl started training in undercover work for 2 hours a day. The rest of the time, Lenatus did what you'd call self-care, which basically meant she was just chilling. She spent all day just eating and sleeping, which most people would think is the dream job. Lenatus could have lived like that forever, and she even started feeling a little guilty about her sister. Once again, before going to sleep, thinking about Estelle, Lenatus figured out it had been exactly 10 days. Theodore hadn't called her back for a blood-sucking session yet, and the silence was starting to get to her. The silence in the room was broken by a rustling sound, and turning around, Lenatus saw Skian had shown up again. For some reason, the slime's little face looked unhappy, even though the girl hadn't said anything to it yet. But Skian already knew she was stressing out again about that dude the slime accidentally peeked in on when it mixed up the rooms. Lenatus found out that Theodore was asleep at the time, but then she got all huffy that the slime called the master a dude. Her first thought was that Skian might be a girl slime, but that probably wasn't it. Then she explained that you can't call people dudes and chicks, and asked him to at least call the master a man. The pink blob agreed, and then proudly announced that he was a man slime too. When it turned out that Skian was a guy, Lenatus got bummed out for some reason and even felt awkward. But that wasn't her main worry, and she just went to sleep, letting the slime stay on the bed. The next morning at the manor turned out to be pretty lively. A young maid came into Lenatus's room and started calling her softly from the doorway, trying to wake her up. Lenatus was mumbling her sister's name in her sleep when she heard some girl's voice telling her to wake up. She jumped up, totally confused, not understanding what was going on or why someone else was in her room. Standing in front of her was a pretty freaked out young girl with pigtails and eyes wide with shock. When Lenatus asked who she was, the maid explained her name was Claire and she worked here as a servant. Then she explained that Archduke Kerio was returning from inspecting his lands, and all the staff had to greet him. Claire was talking about Theodore's father. He's the current head of the family and a really famous guy in this country. Plus, he's got power almost equal to the emperor, but he's way more famous for being a ruthless bastard. Families who fought him wiped out, men sold into slavery, women sold into brothels. On the battlefield, Kerio showed zero mercy, beheading the entire royal family of a neighboring kingdom. He hung their heads at the castle gates, and there's nobody in this whole country who doesn't know Archduke Kerio. Lenatus obediently went out to join the others, to meet her de facto direct boss. The Archduke strutted past like a peacock, radiating an aura of sheer terror that made everyone keep their heads down. Then he stopped and fixed her with this terrifying stare that sent shivers down her spine. His gaze really did feel like it was drilling into her bones, but he realized that this was the very sorceress. Lenatus didn't know where to look. She hadn't done anything wrong, but he was looking at her like she was nothing. Okay, so she overslept a little, and Claire had to run and wake her. Even Orty was pissed about it. But she got ready in record time and managed to show up before the Archduke arrived. Now it felt like this guy was about to punish her for something, even though she's actually helping his son. Then suddenly, Kerio just turned around, creating a slight breeze. But Lenatus was even more terrified now. She heard him call her the sorceress. His voice wasn't loud, but it was absolutely terrifying. A shiver ran down the girl's spine, but she didn't dare say a word. Lenatus just watched him walk away when Claire immediately told her to lower her head. Being late and daring to look at the master meant a serious beatdown from Mr. Ordinary. He was glaring at Lenatus from afar, but she was worried about something else entirely. The Archduke only said one sentence, but with such a scornful tone, looking at her like a tool. She still felt that shiver, but now it was anger, and she never wanted to meet that man again. Later, Lenatus started training Theodore's nanny, Rita, telling her to memorize everything she did. Besides, it was time for the girl to serve tea herself, since she'd been learning every day. What's more, her first time she'd be serving tea to Master Theodore, and now she'd have even more to worry about. The nanny knocked on his office door first, announcing that tea had arrived, but he told her not to disturb him. He said he didn't want any tea, and Lenatus figured she could just go back to having fun. But then she realized the young Archduke's voice sounded like he was in a bad mood. Nurse Rita also picked up that the master wasn't in the mood for tea and told Lenatus to come back tomorrow. The maids headed back, but the girl couldn't shake her worry about the young master. To satisfy her curiosity, she asked the nurse if she knew what was up. But then she thought, what if Theodore's turning into a demon again? Then we're all screwed. Suddenly, Rita decided to tell the newbie, since she'd be working there anyway. She explained that the young master's mood changed because the Archduke was back. Theodore and his dad don't get along, so when Kerio comes back, he's instantly bummed out. The idea that rich people can have bad relationships might sound weird. Hey, it's cool, because Lenatus' relationship with her dad was a total train wreck too. Hearing that, Rita stopped dead. Looked like she was dying to hear the whole backstory. Then the girl confessed she had an older sister who made her life worth living. Next, she wondered if the young master had any other relatives, but the nanny got all weird about it. Rita went quiet for a sec, and Lenatus suddenly remembered something from the novel. Turns out, Master Theodore's own mother hated his guts and refused to acknowledge him. She was constantly kicking him out and even wished he was dead, because she thought he was a monster. But in the novel, the Archduke's wife was only mentioned in passing, and that was the only time. Which made sense, since Theodore's relationship with her was seriously messed up. The nanny told Lenatus all this too, and begged her never, ever to talk to the young master about his parents. Rita was a little worried about Theodore herself, having to live with that family. Then, Lenatus remembered her own dad was a tyrant, but she got through it thanks to her sister. But Mr. Theodore doesn't have any relatives he can rely on, does he? It was weird knowing him as this cruel, cold guy who torments the main character, but also as a deeply wounded person. Even weirder for Lenatus was that she was starting to care about him so much. Right then, the young master suddenly got a craving for some mood-boosting tea. Lenatus, taking advantage of being off work, headed to her secret spot in the garden. Skin told her about it, and she could take a nap there in peace, after enjoying the fact she even had the time. In this spot, in the shade of a broadleaf tree on super soft grass, it was nice to sleep any time of day. Usually nobody goes there, and it's a great place to hide from the scorching sun. Lenatus was sure that even she would only have sweet dreams in a place like this. She was just starting to drift off when she heard someone start counting, nearly scaring her heart out. After calming down a little, she started peering through the bushes to see who was ruining her peace with their yelling. Pushing aside a few branches, she saw a ripped dude training with a sword and counting out loud as he did. During his workout, the guy turned a bit, and Lenatus got a good look at his face. She recognized him and was totally shocked, not understanding what he was doing there. The guy kept doing his exercises like nothing happened, but Lenatus stayed put too. The moment their eyes met, he looked at her like he was about to kill her and throw her in a dungeon. It was that night, Instrud Glasses, the one who was carrying Theodore. But why was he training alone? Lenatus didn't get why he was showing such hostility from the moment they locked eyes. But she doesn't have a real reason to fight him now, so she decided to just head back. Only, her legs were frozen, and her eyes were glued to those amazing, mind-blowing muscles again. Lenatus hadn't seen muscles like that even back in the village, and she was really digging them. If only this guy was a couple inches taller. She was disoriented down in the dungeon, and it was too dark to see anything anyway. Now his face seemed really cute. She was struck by his red hair and blue eyes. Lenatus then caught herself getting lost in thought about him again. So lost in thought that she didn't even notice the knight finishing his workout and starting to walk towards her. Pushing aside the branches she was hiding behind again, he wondered what the sorceress was doing out here all alone. When Lenatus looked at his face again, she subconsciously spoke his name out loud, and the knight stared at her even harder, confused about how she could possibly know his name. Instrude Glacis, the hero from the novel, signature look, red hair, blue eyes. More than just Theo's bodyguard, he fell hard for Estella at first sight and tried to help her escape. But his plan crashed and burned, leading to a tragic end for him. Now Lenatus, trying to weasel her way out of this, claimed Lord Orty told her about him. Instrud was still giving her that "I'm gonna kill you" look, even though she actually liked the guy in the story. In the novel, this knight never believed a sorceress could calm Theo's madness. Estella's calming touch only fueled his obsession and drove him even crazier for her. Watching Theo lose his mind more and more, Instrud just didn't buy into the sorceress's magic vibes. If that's how he felt even about Estella, the woman he was head over heels for, what did he think of Lenatus? And now, she was flashing back to the torture in the dungeon, and it was making her rage all over again. And that dude's definitely not gonna help her. He's not head over heels like Estella in the novel. Right then, he wanted to know why she was hiding, and she explained she had a little free time and decided to catch some Z's. Out of nowhere, Instride declares he already knows everything and adds that he isn't interested in chicks like her. He figured she was crushing on him, Mr. Good-looking himself, but Lenatus immediately started objecting. She was already aware he wasn't into her. She felt the same way about him and asked him to listen up. Then she proudly stated that to even get her attention, he'd need to be at least 4 inches taller, and he'd need like 40 pounds more muscle just to even be in her ballpark. And that's the bare minimum for Lenatus to even glance in his direction. Her words suddenly struck the knight's ego hard. He couldn't wrap his head around someone not liking him. Having said her piece, the girl was about to leave, but Instride immediately told her to hold up. He reached out to her, even yelled to stop her, and Lenatus turned around, totally freaked. For a second, she thought it was her monster of a father, about to flay her alive. She immediately crouched down, trembling with fear, and started begging for his forgiveness. The knight yanked his hand back like he'd been burned. He didn't get her reaction. He hadn't even done anything. He wanted to clear things up, but Lenatus was already fighting off a full-blown panic attack. Once she calmed down a bit, the girl explained she'd just been scared, because that's how her dad used to beat her, over and over. Then she asked why Instrad had called her over, but he didn't answer right away. He was like, thinking what to say, like a schoolboy in front of a hottie, then blurted out that she had a leaf stuck in her hair. Lenatus figured it was just an excuse, but she still reached for her hair to check. Then, the knight suddenly grabbed her shoulders. But this time, she wasn't scared, just confused. Instrad told her to hang in there, then just dropped her like she was nothing, even though he was actually gonna ask if she knew of any treatments for Lord Theodore. When Glacis first heard about the cursed bloodline of the Kerio family, he thought it was BS. But seeing Lord Theodore change like that, he realized it was no joke. So before Lenatus left, Instrad wanted to know if she really managed to calm the Lord's condition. The girl played dumb, like she didn't get what he was asking. But then she pointed at him to be quiet, which kinda threw him off. She explained they'd be seeing each other a lot since he's Lord Theodore's bodyguard, and she doesn't like him calling her a sorceress. Then introduced herself as Lenatus Gracia, and told him to call her by her name. Out of politeness, the knight told her his full name too, even though she already knew it. They shook hands, sure, but Instrude seriously doubted some little girl could save Lord Theodore. Before long, Lenatus was back to serving the young master his tea, like always. She was freaking out though, totally lost on what to do. This couldn't be the only way, right? Her anxiety was through the roof, and tears welled up again, streaming down her face. After a couple of tea runs under Rita's hawk eyes, Lenatus finally got the green light to serve him solo. On the way, she decided to spit in his cup, a chance to get her bodily fluids into him, finally. Plus, Theodore and Estella made out a ton in the novel, so saliva had to do something, right? But for some reason, Lenatus felt a pang of guilt right then. Thinking it over, the girl figured Theodore would be better off if she stopped him from becoming a monster early. Popping the lid on the teapot, she started working up spit again, believing she could help the master this way. Just then, she heard his voice behind her, asking what she was up to. The suddenness of it almost made Lenatus choke on her own spit, and her heart leaped into her throat. But she played it cool, explaining it was tea time, and she'd brought him some tea. Entering his room, she started making his tea, just like she was taught. While she was at it, she subtly checked his eyes, confirming they were violet. Then she glanced at his fingernails too. They were neat, nothing to suggest he was turning into a monster. Theodore was also keeping calm, showing no signs of a freakout coming on. Lenatus didn't manage to slip her concoction in this time, but she'll have plenty more chances. Besides, she noticed he was engrossed in reading, so if that keeps up, he should be all right for a while. From the book he was holding, she could tell it was some kind of poetry collection. She never got poetry, never understood what people even liked about it. For a while, Lenatus hadn't noticed Theodore reading, flipping through the pages. Then she looked up and saw him staring intently at her, and who knows how long he'd been doing it. Suddenly, the Archduke asked if she liked books. He'd noticed her watching him with the book for a bit. Truth was, Lenatus was checking on him, but there was no way she could admit that. So she just explained that she didn't really like books. They made her sleepy. She'd read a few motivational and interesting ones in the past, sure, but she doubted there were any like that here. Besides, in their current situation, her family couldn't afford such an expensive luxury. Theodore found books fascinating. He couldn't understand how they could make someone tired. Then, he got curious about what this girl did like, all while keeping his eyes locked on hers. What surprised Lenatus was he never even looked at her when Aunt Rita was around. But now he's constantly talking to her, waiting for an answer, like he's obsessed. She figured he asked about her hobbies, like horseback riding, because he only loves his sister. Then she just blurted out that she really loves eating tasty stuff. That's why she loves living here, because there's so much good food. She had her first steak here, and just learned you can even make it with lamb. And the fish! Lenatus had no idea fish could be so good when it's grilled like a steak. Theodore didn't really get how eating could be a hobby, and she knew it wasn't either. But the Archduke smirked, deciding to keep the conversation going that his little witch started, and confessed there's one reason why so many people call him a foodie. He pointed to a chair next to him, told her to have a seat, and asked what food she really dug. Lenatus was a little flustered, but she plopped down on the soft cushion and racked her brain for a sec. She'd only recently seen something called pudding. They were making it in the kitchen. Too bad she never got to try it, because she wasn't high enough on the pecking order. Pudding's expensive, and they don't make much, so what's left goes to the top dogs first. Theodore figured the senior staff had scarfed it all down, so Lenatus got nothing. Then she went on, saying she'd had some chicken dish yesterday and really liked it. Right then, Theodore corrected her, saying it wasn't chicken, it was pheasant, because he ate it too. Lenatus's face lit up with surprise, realizing there were tons of different foods out there. But what surprised her more was that she wasn't scared to talk to this guy anymore. Actually, she felt amazing, and was wondering if Theodore felt the same way. Hours had passed since their conversation, and the estate was blanketed in late-night darkness. Theodore stood by the window, gazing at the dark sky, remembering the sorceress talking about delicious food. Suddenly, he felt a rush of blood to his head. His hands started shaking, and his vision got a little blurry. Just then, Orty, his assistant, knocked on the door, asking permission to come in. But the Lord's hazy state vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. Orty, from behind the door, announced he had a message for him, and after taking a few deep breaths, Theodore told him to come in. Stepping inside, the assistant noticed that his lord had paled slightly and became concerned about his condition. But he assured him he was fine and asked him to explain what was going on. Remembering why he was there, Orty reported that Countess Pablo was planning to visit the lord tomorrow. After lunch with the Grand Duchess, she asked the lord to prepare himself beforehand for tea. And that message from the Countess came across as a personal request, which was kinda weird. Officially, this Countess was an advisor to Theodore's mother, but she was actually one of the potential engagement candidates. There were rumors about Theodore getting engaged. Started with a ton of candidates, but the list is down to 3. Theodore hadn't met any of these candidates and didn't really care. He was just planning to send her off to a separate house. Now, he had a meeting with the Countess coming up, and he needed to get ready beforehand. He told his assistant to draw him a clean bath, and when Lady Pablo arrives, to discreetly direct her to the bedroom. Orty was a little surprised, but the Archduke hurried him along and hinted that he shouldn't be drinking tea with her in his house. The assistant didn't quite get it, but immediately obeyed and went to prepare what he was ordered to. As a final touch, Theodore added that everything should be prepared according to the rules. Orty bowed out of the master's bedroom, leaving him to his thoughts, all about his mother. To her, he wasn't a son, but a doll to sell for top dollar, just to keep her status. But who knows if he was even lucky to be a doll? His father never even considered selling him. He just saw him as someone to mold into an obedient mannequin. Probably wanted Theodore dead more than his own mother did. If it wasn't for the messy questions about the funeral and the inheritance, that would have been his fate. From that day on, the only reason Theodore is still alive is because he just can't die. That same evening, Stygian showed up at Lenatus's again, and immediately started yelling when he saw she was about to eat poisoned food. Lenatus was a little surprised, because the Lord told her that if you got rid of all the poison, the food was totally edible. It'd be safe if you removed the pouch and poisonous bits, like taking off a scorpion's tail and frying it up. Slime didn't get why you'd fry a scorpion. People really confused him sometimes, but Lenatus was like, even a monster shouldn't have to live on crickets and dirty water. Then the slime cut her off, reminding her he's a top-tier demon, and demanded some respect. Sigyun, all huffy, threatened to stop talking to her if she kept it up, which Lenatus was totally cool with, since it meant the slime would finally shut up and she could get some sleep. But a minute later, she started talking again, deciding to share some brilliant thought with the slime. She confessed that she was really comfortable around Lord Theodore, that despite everything, he was noble and not scary. He turned out to be a totally different person than Lenatus imagined him to be from the book. Plus, she figures it's not every aristocrat you can just chill around like that. The next day, Countess Pablo showed up at Theodore's place and immediately complimented his tea, saying it smelled amazing. Then she admitted she'd been asking around to see if the Grand Duke used good tea. She apologized right away if her comment seemed rude, but Theodore didn't care. He doesn't know anything about tea anyway. Lenatus, who had to serve them tea, felt super awkward at that moment. She couldn't figure out what happened to the vibe the second the Countess got invited here today. But Lenatus did notice she was a beautiful woman with shimmering blonde hair. Her smile radiated aristocratic elegance, and her aura kinda reminded her of Estelle. Pablo started talking about Count Gemte, who recently built a huge greenhouse and grows super expensive tulips there. Lenatus didn't want to be there anymore. She just wanted to serve the tea quick and get the heck out of there. As she poured the drink, the girl noticed the Duke's hand was trembling a little. That's weird, because even if he was interested in the Countess, he's not the type to get all shaky in front of a lady. Though, if he really liked her, Theodore would probably just lock her up in a tower. Out of the corner of her eye, Lenatus noticed the Lord's eyes flash red. She freaked, because if his madness took hold here, the Countess could get hurt, who was totally clueless and kept giggling like she was flirting. Lenatus sucked it up and told her it wasn't a good day for tea. The Countess's face went stiff. There's a real pecking order in this world. A maid can't just talk to a noble, not without permission, unless it's an emergency. But Lenatus was staring down an emergency, so she took the risk to warn the Countess, who should have been pissed, but instead just smiled sweetly, like she'd been complimented. Then she told Lord Theodore they were done with tea, so the maid could leave them. But Lenatus wasn't backing down. She blurted out that the young lord wasn't feeling well. She wanted to tell Lady Pablo that if she didn't leave right now, she'd be in serious trouble. But she phrased it more carefully, all while shielding the Duke with her own body. Again, she said he was in such bad shape, he could barely answer. Then again asked the Countess to leave. For some reason, it worked. And getting up, the lady promised to visit Theodore another time. The Countess headed for the exit, and Lenatus immediately turned to the young master to check on him. Just then, Lady Pablo glanced back, and she didn't like what she caught out of the corner of her eye. Still, she left, and Lenatus was trying to get the Duke to say anything to her, even a single word. His condition was worsening, and the girl realized she somehow needed to get her bodily fluids into him now. The thought of spitting in his tea came to her again, and she immediately reached for his cup. But Theodore grabbed her hand. His fangs were starting to show, and he reached for the girl's neck with them. Lenatus squeezed her eyes shut, bracing herself for the young master to bite her. But a couple seconds went by, and she didn't feel anything. When she opened her eyes, she saw him slumped on the couch, fighting with every ounce of strength to control himself. He was still holding her hand, struggling to wrestle back control of his body and his madness. Lenatus realized he was single-handedly battling against an overwhelming curse. Now the girl saw that same look on his face again, like he felt guilty about something. Reaching out to him, she started to speak, but the Duke just stared at the floor in silence. Understanding how hard it was for him, the girl decided to help him, and immediately wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him. The next moment, it dawned on her that she'd made a moral mistake. They hadn't even held hands yet, especially since they weren't even dating, and she got scared, not knowing what to do now. In the novels she read in her past life, the male lead usually took the initiative, but Theodore wasn't capable of that right now, and Lenatus remembered one of the romantic moments from the book. Suddenly, she felt something weird, but nice, like a surge of pure energy flowing through her body, so she kept kissing him, feeling his fangs, which were small, like the madness hadn't fully taken hold yet. Now, Lenatus thought Theodore looked more like a little puppy than a monster, and it was actually kinda cute. Immediately, the girl sobered up, because this wasn't the time for those thoughts. She knew what could happen next, and she leaned back a little from Lord Theodore. His eyes were still red, and he just gripped her hands tighter. After that, he kissed her himself, and Lenatus even got worried that it would be hard for him to catch his breath. However, Theodore still wouldn't let her go, and she stopped resisting him. While understanding that it was all for the sake of treatment, She was just sharing her vibes to heal his madness. Translation failed. 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 Lenatus had no idea what that was. Plus, her numb lips were her biggest worry right now. Soon after, when Countess Pablo got home, she totally lost it and went ballistic. She was throwing anything she could get her hands on, not understanding how a maid dared insult her, and especially not in front of Duke Theodore. The Countess wasn't about to let that slide. The next morning, when the sun's rays found their way into Lenatus's room and onto her bed, she started to wake up. Before even opening her eyes, she felt something soft with her hand, and then saw it was a slime. It woke up too, and yawning, wondered why Lenatus had jumped up so suddenly, but she didn't have time for a long explanation. She was in a hurry to check if Master Theodore was okay. She quickly changed into her uniform and was about to leave. But Skyen asked her to wait a minute. The girl obeyed, thinking it might be something important. But it turned out the slime was just demanding breakfast. Lenatus just winked at him and said that since he was a big-shot demon, he could figure out his own damn breakfast. She was practically sprinting down the hallway. Last time she saw Theodore, he seemed okay, but she needed to see for herself how he was doing. She was gonna get the lowdown from Orty first, but then some maids stopped her. Lenatus turned around, but didn't recognize the maid. She didn't know everyone in the mansion yet. The maid immediately reported that someone was looking for the girl with pink hair out in the courtyard, which surprised Lenatus. She started asking who and why, but the maid wasn't sure if she should spill all the details right away. She just said the newbie should hurry up, or she'd be in for a world of hurt later. Then she spun around and left. Looks like another person who believes the rumors about the pink-haired witch. Lenatus didn't get why they were so obviously avoiding her. It's not like she even knows any spells. Either way, she decided to check who was waiting, even though nobody should be looking for her in this castle. She was curious who it could be. For a second, she thought of her sister, but she'd probably never come here. It could be someone else who believes the rumor about the pink-haired sorceress, like that guy did. But Lenatus was afraid they'd ask her to make a prediction or brew up some magic potion. What scared her even more was the thought of being asked to put a curse on someone. While she was thinking about all this, she didn't notice the maid sneak up behind her, grab her hair, and yank her down. She instantly felt this heavy, oppressive vibe, and then she saw the maid's furious face right in front of her. But Lenatus didn't totally freak out. She grabbed the stranger's arm, trying to free her hair, and demanded she let go. Her physical strength really helped her out here. She twisted her opponent's arm and threw her aside. Now, Lenatus was glaring angrily at the one who dared attack her, and she wanted to teach her a lesson. The maid was totally freaked out, not understanding what kind of superhuman strength she was dealing with. Just then, the Countess's voice rang out, demanding that they call for reinforcements, and she chewed out her maid for not being able to bring a girl half her size to her knees. The Countess moved closer, hiding her face under an umbrella, but Lenatus still recognized that voice. Then, when Lady Pablo raised the umbrella, she knew for sure. And the lady was acting like she'd just stumbled in. Then she attacked Lenatus, angrily saying how dare she kick her out of here. She even admitted she was insulted, and started thinking about how to kill her to feel better. Lenatus immediately started explaining that she hadn't meant to kick the Countess out. Something urgent just came up. But the lady declared that no one disrespects her in front of Lord Theodore, no matter what the situation. The girl just sighed heavily. She didn't know how to explain without giving away the young master's secret. Just then, the maid grabbed her hair again, shoved her onto her knees, and Lady Pablo was pissed that she spoke without permission. She demanded Lenatus stay right there in the dirt, and Lenatus could feel the maid pushing her down even harder. But now she understood. Lady Pablo didn't give a damn about the situation. She was just venting her anger. You'd think this lady was feeling pain, but now Lenatus only had one way out. She instantly shoved the maid's hand away, but didn't try to get up from her knees. Glancing at the one who'd just been holding her down, she cursed her out in her head, hoping to get even somehow. But right now, she needed to apologize to Countess Pablo to smooth things over a little. Without looking up, Lenatus said she was sorry and admitted she was wrong. The Countess was a little shocked, but continued to stand silently and watch the girl with the pink hair. Lenatus realized that wasn't enough. Lady Pablo probably wanted to beat her. Ever since she split with her dad, nobody here's laid a finger on her. These people even seemed kind, so Lenatus kind of forgot that not everyone in this world's a saint, and Lady Pablo was wondering why she stopped apologizing. Her maid jumped right on that thought and swung at the poor girl, trying to shut her up. She squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the hit, but nothing happened, and she got curious about what stopped the maid. Turns out, right then, Sir Instrad walked up and managed to grab the villain's hand. He demanded an explanation for what was going on. and Lenatus was in shock, totally clueless where he came from. Glasses also announced that this place is an extension of the Kerio estate, and outsiders can't just waltz in here. Letting go of the freaked-out maid's hand, he demanded she get out of here, now. But she just screamed he can't order her around, pointing out how important her mistress is. The knight acted like he just noticed the countess, and apologized to her in a calm voice. He explained that he only sees the sword, not the person, and he didn't know who the lady was. After that, he politely introduced himself as Sir Theodore's personal knight. Then, he asked her to understand, saying he was only worried about the estate's safety. Lady Pablo gave him a sweet smile and introduced herself in a slightly flirty way. She even admitted that she had tea with Sir Theodore yesterday, at the Duchess's own invitation. Lenatus couldn't recognize the lady who had just been glaring at her. Her whole demeanor had changed in an instant, probably because Instrud was close to the master, and the Countess also claimed that an unfortunate incident happened during the tea party, and right now, she just came to give instructions to the maid who was to blame for that incident. Lenatus knew that this lady was blatantly lying, but she also knew her word meant nothing against hers. She wanted to tell the knight she was innocent, but couldn't get a word out, and he expressed his sympathy, saying a lady's feelings are always understandable. Neither of them even suspected that Lenatus was actually trying to save the Countess from Theodore's madness. And if her little sister Estella were here right now, she'd totally have her back. The girl wanted to cry, but she couldn't. She had to hold on and endure it all alone. Just then, she felt Instrud helping her up and saying that the master's the kind of guy who values his people. So if Lady Pablo wants to be one of his people, she should know that. It was a little wild for the Countess to hear that some maid was considered one of the young master's people. At that moment, Instrud held out his hand to Lenatus, signaling her to give him hers immediately. The girl didn't know why he was doing this, but he probably didn't have bad intentions, so she fulfilled his silent request. Then, Glasses pulled her closer, saying a maid can be more important to her master than she thinks. Lenatus blushed bright red, totally lost on what this knight was even talking about. He just asked her to understand the meaning of his words, if she ever wanted to be one of Lord Theodore's people. Lenatus was trembling with fear, while the knight just smirked, waiting for the Countess's answer. He was just trying to provoke her, and that really freaked the pink-haired girl out. Lady Pablo's expression definitely changed again, but she wasn't showing any aggression yet. Still, just the way she looked and the heavy atmosphere made Lenatus want to disappear. She didn't get why Knight Instrud was pushing things this far. It could end badly for him, but the fact that he was a noble helped her feel a little better. Maybe he was a thorn in the young Countess's side. That gave her a bit of hope. And then she saw Lady Pablo just turn around and head out. Her parting words were just that she'd be asking Mr. Theodore about this directly in the future. She also figured the dumb maid had gotten enough of a lecture, so she was free to go back. As Lady Pablo left, she shot Lenatus a warning look, like this wasn't the last she'd hear from her. For a while, the girl stared after the departing Countess, terrified, and the knight finally let her go. Lenatus didn't know what to do now. Instrud had said so much, she was definitely in for it. She wanted to explain to him that he messed up with all his chatter, but he just calmly asked if she was okay. Though looking at her, he realized things weren't so good. Her lips were cracked and her face was covered in cuts. He also noticed that her face was swollen and her whole palm was scratched up, and decided to take care of it right away. Grabbing the still scared and shaken girl, Sir Instrud dragged her along with him. All Lenatus could do was follow him, glancing up at his broad back. She finally understood how people fall for those sweet background characters. Meanwhile, Duke Theodore was trying to sort through his own head. All his past fits were hazy, but this time, he remembered everything clear as day, which freaked him out. He'd just woken up, feeling totally disoriented, but he went looking for the pink-haired mage anyway. He figured that the clarity stuck around because the madness hadn't completely taken over yet. He needed to talk to Lenatus, but when he got to her room, he heard some yelps and another voice he recognized. It was definitely Instrud, telling her to open her mouth wider, and the Duke's mind went straight to the gutter. In a split-second rush of emotion, Theodore threw the door open to see what the hell was going on. But he was totally not expecting to see his personal knight tending to his mage's wounds. And Lenatus about jumped out of her skin when Theodore barged into the room. But she snapped out of it, and even though she had no clue how he got here, she asked how he was feeling. Theodore himself felt something weird when he saw the knight applying some kind of healing ointment around her mouth. Instrud, for his part, looked totally lost, even though none of this was his fault. And the Duke, finally figuring out what was going on, felt embarrassed because he jumped to the wrong conclusion. Then he decided to leave them, asking them to just keep doing what they were doing before. The knight still wanted to ask the master what happened, and the girl started to get a hunch. In the hallway, Orty found Theodore looking super worried. After he didn't find the master resting in bed, he freaked out, not knowing what had happened. Then he explained that everyone had been looking for the master for a while, and he was really worried about him. The Duke just silently walked past his assistant, and he reached out to him, thinking he was sick again. Theodore turned to him then, eyes bright and clear, and just said he was totally fine. But Orty was thrown off by his flushed face and started begging him to go back to his room and call a doctor. He even told the guy to eat something light but nutritious, to give his body a fighting chance. After a couple of steps, Theodore asked for pudding, which really threw the assistant for a loop. The Duke never touched the stuff before, but he just repeated his order, even more forceful this time. Turns out, that pudding was meant for Lenatus, who was absolutely thrilled when she saw it. Claire, one of the maids, brought it to her, and Lenatus figured they must have had guests if there was leftover pudding. They didn't even serve it when the Countess came, so the maid explained that the Duke had specifically ordered it. He usually hates sweets, but today he asked them to make 20 of them. He ate one himself, so the servants each got one, including Lenatus. Claire brought it herself, hoping it'd help the sorceress recover way faster. Lenatus noticed Claire was scared of her at first, but now she's totally chill around her. But whenever that maid screwed up, Orty would yell at her, and Lenatus got caught in the crossfire. So they kept bumping into each other, and it kinda helped them get closer in a way. Claire figured Orty only yelled because he was worried about Lenatus. She had no clue it was cause of Theodore. And when she handed her the pudding, she told her to get some rest and was about to head out. She also told her to be careful and watch where she's stepping in the future. Lenatus just told her she fell. She didn't want to spill that she got the wounds in a fight. She told the same thing to the knight, Instrud, so he wouldn't ask too many questions and rat out the Duke. Lenatus realized she wasn't as alone as she thought, and just then, a slime popped up, scared out of its mind by how she looked. He saw the bandages on her swollen face and started grilling her about what happened. Instead of figuring out an excuse, she just offered him pudding, saying it was super tasty. Skyen couldn't get how she could be happy eating sweets looking like that, like some monster. But Lenatus knew he was worried about her, mainly because she feeds him morning and night. Then Skyen, totally outraged, declared his servant shouldn't look like that, which confused her. Next thing, he's asking who did this to her, like he wanted revenge. Lenatus confessed she had to kick the Countess out of her room yesterday, and she got pissed, apparently. So today, she came to get even. Skyen was ready to go find the lowlife, but Lenatus told him to chill and forget it. She didn't want to talk about the people who hated her enough to get violent. She just wants to live, remembering the people who like her and who she likes. Instrad patched her up, and Claire brought her some tasty pudding and wished her a speedy recovery. On top of that, Orty and Aunt Rita were worried about her, and she's got Skyen, who gets mad on her behalf. Now the slime was totally baffled, and the girl realized that he was touched by her speech. Skyen just grumbled that nothing could touch him. But Lenatus didn't argue, and just offered him more pudding. Taking a pretty decent bite and still chewing, the slime admitted that it was a pretty good human-made dish. Lenatus was happy that her little round friend liked it, and now she was going to try the sweet treat herself. But then the girl remembered that she'd forgotten to mention the most important name of all the people who care about her. That name was Theodore, but Lenatus stayed quiet, and just after swallowing a bit of dessert, agreed that it was delicious. A little later, the young master summoned her and asked her to get ready. The girl obediently agreed, even though she didn't understand what she needed to prepare for. Theodore mentioned she still hadn't spent the money he'd given her recently. Then he announced they were going out today to blow it all. Lenatus was stunned. That was her emergency fund, the one she was saving for the future. Earlier that day, Instrad had approached the Duke and said they needed to beef up security around the annex. But Theodore pointed out that the right to deploy soldiers belonged to Archduke Kerio. Glasses knows that, but as his personal knight, he wants to make a recommendation through the proper channels. The annex is part of the Archduchy and shouldn't be short on soldiers. Anything could happen after all. The Duke wasn't quite sure what the knight meant by these unexpected events. Then, Instrad confessed that yesterday, an unauthorized intruder was discovered in the backyard. Glasses was immediately informed about the trespasser, and the intruder's name was Countess Pablo. Theodore was thrown, 'cause the lady visited 2 days ago. Why was she there yesterday? Then, he started racking his brain, trying to remember what happened the day before. When his fit hit, Lenatus had to calm him down quick. He could almost still feel her touch from that moment. But snapping back to reality, he asked what the Countess could have been doing in the annex yesterday. With a slightly guilty tone, the knight reported that Lady Pablo came to discipline a rude servant. Remembering that no one but Lenatus met this lady, Theodore realized they were talking about his mage. In that instant, the Duke blew his top. The knight rushed to calm him, saying he'd brought the servant back and given her first aid. Now, Theodore was sure Instrud was healing her wounds yesterday, and he felt guilty all over again. Then, he asked the knight to remind him again what the rude lady's name was. And the knight said, Camila de Pablo. The Duke's emotions were already raging. He vowed to himself that he would never forget that name. Lenatus felt way better this morning. Her wounds healed up nicely overnight. She figured it was 'cause she ate something tasty yesterday and finally got some decent rest. Aunt Rita and Orty told her to chill again today, but she felt like she still had a job to do. So, she brought a tea tray to the Duke's room and saw Instrud walk out, looking all stressed. It was weird seeing him like that. Probably something happened with Theodore again, even though he seemed fine recently. Lenatus greeted the knight, asking about his visit with the Duke, and he admitted that they were finished. Then, he looked closer at her face and noticed she was doing much better, even with the bandages. She realized she never thanked Glasses for taking care of her, because she was busy, so she thanked him right then. But he said he wasn't looking for thanks. He was just glad she was feeling better. Though, spotting the top of her head as Lenatus bowed, he noticed her hair looked soft and fluffy. It rang a bell for him, so he even reached out to touch it, which kinda weirded the girl out. She immediately asked why he was feeling her head, but the knight just burst out laughing. He just told her to try not to upset people so much next time. Lenatus said she was trying her best, but according to her dad, she gets on people's nerves easily. Just then, the Duke peeked out and noticed those two were getting along pretty well right in front of his room. The girl immediately reported that she'd brought him tea, and Instrud was about to go reinforce the guards. After Lenatus disappeared into the room with Duke Theodore, the knight remembered what her hair reminded him of. That pink mop looked a lot like the wool of a soft little lamb. The girl really did look like a guilty little lamb in front of the Duke when they were alone, especially since he was giving her this piercing look, like he was about to give her a good scolding. Lenatus was clueless about what she'd done wrong, and why the young master was staring at her like that. It was messing with her head, a whole bunch of different feelings hitting her all at once, and she didn't know where to look. Suddenly, the Duke turned away, but only because the look on her face reminded him of what happened before. He couldn't figure out why she was serving him tea, considering her injuries hadn't fully healed yet. Theodore himself thought this girl should really be taking it easy for a while longer. Turning back to her, he suddenly mentioned that Lenatus still hadn't left the estate grounds. The girl confirmed it, and right then and there, Theodore asked her to get ready. He wanted to take her out for a walk, so she could spend the money she'd been saving up. He's talking about those $2 million he gave her not long ago to buy a new dress. She'd kept it safe and hadn't spent it, wanting to save it for the future, when she'd be living with her sister. Looks like Lenatus is going to be forced to spend that money today, whether she likes it or not. But at the boutique, this girl almost had a heart attack when she saw the clothes cost 4.5 million loon. Now she understood why the Duke gave her a whole 2 million, but she didn't even have anywhere to wear dresses that fancy. Now Lenatus was totally lost. She thought Theodore was just messing with her. The Duke was thinking that Lenatus didn't want to leave him. That's why she wasn't leaving the estate. But luckily, he had business in the shopping district, and that was a reason to take her out for a walk. And now he was asking her to buy clothes at such an expensive store. It was just torturing the girl. But so as not to let down the master's request, she decided to buy something the cheapest and quickly return back. Suddenly, some woman came up behind her and immediately started yelling at Lenatus, asking what she was doing. The girl was completely confused. She was just looking at dresses and hadn't done anything wrong. Turns out it was just a sales lady who didn't like the girl hanging around the clothes for too long, like she was gonna steal something. Then she snatched the dress right out of her hands, saying they were all too expensive, and someone like her couldn't afford it. After that, she pointed right at the door and demanded, real angry-like, that she get the hell out of there. But Lenatus acted like she didn't quite get what the woman was saying, which just ticked the sales lady off even more, who then added that people like her were always hanging around the store, making the whole place look bad. But then, Lenatus, with a little bit of pride, announced that she just wanted to thank the woman. After all, it's not like she can do anything if her master orders her to leave. That way, she can just go right back to Master Theodore and hold on to her money. Lenatus even felt like hugging the sales lady, saying that the clothes really were too expensive for her. And while the woman was thinking she was some kind of nutcase, Duke Theodore himself walked into the store. The bickering ladies even stopped mid-sentence when they saw him walk in. The shop girl just clammed up, totally stunned by his high-class good looks, and his clothes were obviously top-tier, screamed blue blood. She immediately started apologizing, thinking she'd bothered him while he was browsing. Then she offered to help out, told him not to hesitate to ask if he needed anything. She was rambling so fast, the Duke couldn't get a word in. She didn't even realize he was with that girl. Lenatus got it, though. Next to Theodore, she looked like some dirt-poor nobody. But then he walked right up to Lenatus, who was looking bummed, and demanded the shop girl explain what she'd done to his companion. Lenatus and the shop girl were both gaping. Nobody expected the Duke to do that. They were trying to figure out what was going on. but Theodore just repeated his question, louder this time. But Lenatus noticed by the look on his face that he was starting to get pissed. The Duke really did have a stone-cold expression, and his gaze was drilling right through the salesgirl and the wall behind her. The woman immediately bowed low to him, claiming she had no idea who her customers were. She just never expected that girl could be the companion of such an important lord. But Theodore just pointed out that she was bowing wrong, and besides, she should be apologizing to someone else. The salesgirl wasn't stupid, and she understood that she should apologize to this ragamuffin. And gritting her teeth, she bowed to her and offered her deepest apologies. But the girl wasn't upset at all. She wasn't planning to buy anything, even when they offered her a VIP room. Lenatus started refusing, realizing that the stuff there would be even more expensive, and insisted that it wasn't necessary. When suddenly, the Duke himself declared that he didn't want to buy anything here after seeing how they treat customers. Then, he turned to Lenatus, suggesting they hit up another store together. The girl obediently followed him, glancing back at the shop owner as they left, who was standing there, bummed out, realizing she'd just lost a seriously loaded customer. Lenatus had this weird but cool feeling, like when the female lead in a novel gets help from the main dude. Outside, Instrud and Theodore were waiting, and Theodore immediately asked him to take them to another women's clothing store. He recommended another one nearby, a bit pricier, and Lenatus figured those two were in cahoots. She started trying to convince the boss it was getting late, and suggested going back. But the knight pointed out it was only daytime, like someone was twisting his arm, and the Duke, realizing Lenatus's reluctance because of the incident, promised to stick by her side, which of course didn't work for her, because then she'd definitely have to shell out and buy a dress. It was a dead end, and she didn't want to tell her employer the truth, but she couldn't take it anymore, and blurted out that she needed that money. Theodore and Instrud traded glances, then stared questioningly at the pink-haired girl. The Duke even double-checked what she meant, but she just started thanking him for being so concerned. She gets that he wants to make up for her ripped clothes, but to her, that's just money she can use later. And besides, she has nowhere to wear a fancy dress. Hearing that explanation, the knight barely held back his laughter. But Lenatus noticed, and it pissed her off. But she kept explaining that the day will come when all this is over, and the young master will finally be back to normal. On that day, she wants to leave the estate and go live with the person she loves. At that moment, both men got super serious. They had no idea Lenatus meant her little sister, but the knight was curious who she loved, while the Duke felt disappointed. And all three were thinking different things, but then Theodore decided it was time to head back, which made the girl happy. Besides, she felt totally wiped out, even though she hadn't really done anything today. Right then, all she wanted was to get back and crash ASAP. She was so tired she nodded off, and the Duke noticed she was running on empty. A minute later, she was totally out, which surprised Theodore, because she'd been pretty lively just a bit ago. But seeing her all slumped over, head lolling, he knew she couldn't be comfy sleeping like that. Then, he remembered again what she said about wanting to be with the person she loved when this was all over. That's when it hit him that because of that special someone, Lenatus was putting her own happiness dead last. Theodore remembered how, on the day of his first attack, he'd been crushed by his awful fate. He could already see his future and knew it was going to be a horrible end, and nobody would even mourn him. Even though he didn't get why he was even thinking about it, it was coming for him, and he couldn't escape it. Even his own parents call him a monster. His life's a dead end, and nothing ever goes his way. But the clothes were just an excuse. Theodore felt bad she got hurt and wanted to pay her back somehow. And in the end, it was this young lady who ended up doing him another favor. His gaze locked onto her pink hair again. It looked almost magical to him. He just had to touch it, which he did right away, but super carefully, so he wouldn't wake Lenatus. He really didn't want to hurt her in any way, or see her get hurt by anyone else. And if he didn't have this obsession, she wouldn't be in the mansion, and she wouldn't have gotten hit. Just then, Lenatus started mumbling in her sleep that she couldn't eat anymore, that her stomach was going to explode. The Duke was freaked out at first, but then he got it, and he got curious about what she was dreaming. And then, drooling and with a goofy grin, the girl started mumbling about pudding. Theodore remembered his father talking about witches like her, saying they were just tools to get rid of madness. So the young Duke kissed her without hesitation, because of her magic power that nullifies insanity. That's what he thought anyway, until right then, when the carriage hit a bump and Theodore almost fell on Lenatus. But the girl didn't even feel it. She was snoring away, which was a relief. Then, he quietly tapped Instrad, who was sitting next to the coachman, and asked him to tell him to take it easy. But the coachman reminded him that they needed to arrive at a certain time. Still, Theodore didn't see what the big deal was if they were a little late, and asked him again not to rush so much. The Duke realized that looking at this girl, he felt calmer, even though he'd never heard of a witch giving anyone hope. But that's what he felt around Lenatus, and it seemed like she might bring him a happy ending. Theodore remembered being a little kid, hiding behind a tree and whimpering. His dad came up and asked why he was crying, but the kid was too scared to answer. The man didn't press him for an answer, just held out his hand and told him to get up. Little Theodore freaked out when he saw that his dad's hand was covered in blood. His father didn't get why his son was so surprised and said that he had hands just like that. He looked down at his own arms in horror and saw that they were actually covered in blood up to his elbows. His dad pretended to comfort him, saying the poor kid just inherited the cursed blood, but he's the heir to the Kerio dukedom, and he's just like his old man. Now the boy's got no hope. He'll never have a normal life again. His fate is sealed, because there's no escape from this destiny. Theodore was getting more and more terrified. It felt like the air around him was turning into blood. It's filling his lungs, twisting into these sharp, flesh-tearing clumps. Next thing he knows, he's trying to scream, eyes snapping open, and he's staring at a terrified Lenatus. It took him a sec to figure out what the hell was going on, why she was so freaked, holding a blanket like that. She explained she brought him tea, but he was out cold, so she just wanted to tuck him in. That's when Theodore realized all those messed up images he just saw were just a bad dream. But she didn't let him dwell on it, fussing about how the weather was changing fast, and she didn't want him catching a cold. Her sister always used to tell her how easy it was to get sick in weather like this, and the Duke realized she was close to her. The girl instantly started gushing about how amazing her big sister was, how she took care of her and raised her. She's 22 now, but she's been raising Lenatus since she was born, ever since their mom passed away. Truth was, she didn't really want to keep talking about Estelle, and she definitely didn't want to talk about their dad. But for some reason, he got interested in her sister, and she felt like it could trigger some real craziness, so she changed the subject. She got curious if Theodore was an only child, and he admitted he had an older brother. Lenatus was surprised. She always thought he had a younger brother, even though the novel never mentioned it. Now it's confusing why Theodore's the heir, because usually it's the oldest son who gets that title. Though maybe that brother was such an idiot, they decided to keep him far, far away from that responsibility. Then again, he could have run off with some commoner. The novel didn't say anything about that either. To satisfy her curiosity, the girl started carefully asking what happened to that brother. And Theodore confessed that he died 18 years ago due to insanity, right in front of him. Hearing that, Lenatus realized she'd touched a sore spot, and she even felt a little ashamed for asking. But for her, that information was pretty unexpected, and she realized that brother never found someone like her. That's when Theodore said his brother had found a witch who could help. Lenatus was thrown for a loop. If he had a cure, why the hell did he die? The Duke explained that during another fit of madness, his brother lost it and killed the witch. And once that witch was gone, he went completely off the rails, leaving their father no choice but to put him down. Hearing that, Lenatus even started stuttering. For a moment, she was absolutely terrified. Theodore went on, saying he saw his brother kill someone with his own eyes, and then die himself. You could tell from the young Duke's face that these memories weighed him down. He even seemed to feel guilty. The girl understood how awful it must be to see family kill family, no matter what the circumstances. The Duke noticed Lenatus trying to hide her shivers. But after a story like that, how could she not? Now, he was afraid that he might hurt this girl at some point because of his own madness. He tried to change the subject, but Lenatus just pounced on him with a blanket and wrapped him up like a baby. Theodore was totally caught off guard, especially since her whole vibe had just shifted. Next thing he knew, Lenatus was leaning over him, hugging his neck, which just made him even more freaked out. She said, real firm, that the young master would never do that to her, meaning kill her, and she promised everything would be fine, so he shouldn't worry so much about it. What's more, she was sure of her own strength and wouldn't just die easily. Her voice was full of pride, and Theodore felt awkward as hell. Seeing his confused look, she explained about the blanket, saying that being wrapped up like that makes you feel better. Then she giggled, because he reminded her of kimbap all wrapped up like that. But she instantly realized she'd gotten way too carried away, and immediately apologized. She didn't mean anything bad by it anyway, and she hoped the Duke would be more comfortable like that. Theodore definitely felt himself getting warmer, but it felt like the warmth wasn't from the blanket, but from Lenatus. Late that night, getting ready for bed, she wondered if she'd gone too far during the day, even though Theodore hadn't said anything about it. On the other hand, she couldn't just sit back and do nothing after hearing that story. 18 years ago, Theodore was only 6 years old, and he already had a tragic past. But now, Lenatus understood the source of her pity for him, and why she saw him as a poor, lost kid. It's because that kid is still inside Duke Theodore, and the girl understood how scared he must have been back then. She also understood what he's afraid of now. The thought of him having another episode like that, and it being the end for her, was terrifying. but she had more faith in a positive outcome. Then she imagined what if Estella was killing someone right in front of her. She'd probably be scared shitless and wouldn't know what to do in that situation. My sister would just be standing there, all calm, back to them, holding a bloody knife, telling them to watch. But then it turns out Estella's just making tomato soup for dinner, and the stains are just tomato juice. Lenatus switched her thoughts to tomatoes so easily because she only knew her sister as kind, not some evil villain. But then she decided to picture the situation again. Estella holding a sword with shocking coldness. Her face is like ice, closing in on her target, but she's also incredibly beautiful. Lenatus still couldn't picture her as a killer, but then thought she was going crazy for even thinking about it. She even started punching her pillow to clear her head, but that just woke up the slime, and it started to grumble. The girl immediately apologized and asked what she could do, and it just told her to shut up. But she was really thinking about Theodore, because if he stays a kid, he'll just waste his life, which sucks. These thoughts made Lenatus sad, and she really wanted to stop it from happening. Skian couldn't figure out why she was so worried. The boss is loaded, living the high life. She knew the slime had a point, but still argued that no amount of cash can buy you happiness. He just smirked and chimed in, "Yeah, can't buy it if you ain't got enough dough." Lenatus shot back, saying she was super happy with her sister, even when they were broke. And the slime got curious, wondering if she would have been even happier with the money. He nailed it again, and Lenatus couldn't deny it. That's when Skin decided to show some sympathy. Then he had this brilliant idea. A woman could help the man feel better. The girl was surprised again, not getting how a slime knows so much about people, especially stuff like that. She started getting flustered and began squeezing the pink blob again, but felt herself blushing. Skin realized she got the wrong idea and explained he meant a massage, even calling her a pervert. Look, a massage always boosts your mood, and if it helps the Duke, Lenatus won't have to sweat it so much. It hit her then. This idea was actually genius. She even scooped up the slime, like she wanted to kiss it. Skian started grumbling, telling her to put him down. But when Lenatus called him a genius, he kinda liked it. The girl realized that this needed a total 180 from tragedy. The heroes had to end up happy, period. Now she had to flip this tragic novel into a healing one, but she had no clue how to pull that off. She'd read tons of romance novels, but she never stumbled across anything remotely healing. They had everyone from emperors to ministers and merchants, plus presidents, secretaries, and managers. There were even beast people and demons, but they always turned out to be some kind of obsessive fanatics. Still, she was happy right now that no one could see the trash heap where she dumped her digital libraries. Then she died, and suddenly realized she couldn't remember how, even though she remembered all the books. Her memories were hazy. She couldn't tell if it was an accident or if she'd even been hurt. The only thing that snapped her out of it was Skian's yell, which scared the crap out of her. Turns out she'd spaced out on him, and he was griping about her manhandling his summer. Lenatus started apologizing, but it didn't help, so she started squishing him again, but softer this time, giving him a weird massage. The girl noticed the slime was practically purring with pleasure. In that moment, she realized that she, from her past life, was different from who she'd become now. As far as that world was concerned, her life was over, but she was here now, and she actually mattered. So, for her own sake, Lenatus had to change this world's genre to something more wholesome. But then her thoughts went back to not knowing what to do, and she started freaking out again. The slime, who was just basking in bliss, couldn't understand why this human was spiraling again. Then the girl asked him what would help him feel better and happier. For Skian, the answer was always the same. He'd be happy if the whole world bowed before him. But Lenatus asked him to tell her something else, something that could bring happiness from a human perspective. Something tasty was an option, and it made Lenatus happy. But Theodore already eats better than she does. Then the slime came up with something else, but he hesitated a little with the answer. And then he finally admitted that he liked sleeping next to Lenatus, because she has a special scent. It's nice and cozy next to her, and when they sleep together, he even has wonderful dreams. These words made the girl so happy that she even hugged the slime, and admitted that she wasn't so lonely with him. Suddenly, the tone of her voice changed a little, and she suggested going to bed, even though Skian was just starting to get into the pleasure of it all. Lenatus put him on her head, but he kept sliding off, though that's what you'd expect from a slime. After that, she switched her thoughts to tasty food and sleep to regain her strength. The next day, Claire got worried about Lenatus. When she saw how spaced out she looked, she thought something serious had happened, but she just smirked and admitted she had a lot on her mind. Since the day Claire told her to keep her head down, they'd become close friends. So, Lenatus decided to start her healing with her and assured her friend that she was fine. Besides, when she woke up that morning, she got a pretty decent breakfast. The girls chatted about all sorts of little things while munching on buns and tea, when all of a sudden, they overheard some guys behind them talking about some casual flirting during their trip. Lenatus immediately turned around to see who came up with this crazy idea. Standing before her was Noah, a tall and pretty buff blonde guy who realized she'd overheard them. The guys apologized to the girls, realizing they were being way too loud. Noah snarked that he didn't know there'd be such a busybody around, eating here every day with those curled locks. Lenatus figured he was talking about her hair and snapped back that it curls naturally. Then the dude got nosy, asking her what she does when she wakes up, which she thought was pretty rude. While Lenatus was figuring out what to say, he asked Claire the same thing, slamming his fist on the table. She said she chops vegetables, and the blonde added that they all wake up and work. He doesn't get why Rita's so nice to Lenatus, and even Orty seems to ignore that she's just chilling. His yelling didn't scare her though. After her dad, she could adapt to anything. Besides, she's got a dangerous job, because not everyone would let her suck their blood and risk their life. The blonde suddenly blurted out that everyone thinks Lenatus is a witch and shouldn't have been hired in the first place. Because of her, everyone else has more work, and everyone's suffering for it. The girl couldn't figure out what his problem was. She got the feeling he'd been rejected by every girl he'd ever met. Still, she felt like these insults aimed at her were totally unfair, and she was starting to lose it. Then she spun around and asked Claire where the axe was. Claire froze, freaked out, and the blonde suddenly shut his trap. They both thought Lenatus was about to chop something off this jerk. Looking terrified, the maid with the pigtails begged her friend not to resort to violence. Eventually, they went out into the courtyard, naturally followed by the other servants in the kitchen, who just had to watch. Chickens were roaming around the yard, and they eyed the axe suspiciously when they saw the crowd. Lenatus stood right in front of the blonde, breathing down his neck, but the tension between them was building. Claire still didn't get what her friend was planning and started explaining that the axe was only for chopping firewood. But with a determined and arrogant tone, Lenatus turned to the blonde dude and pointed right at him. Then she declared that even though chopping wood every morning might be easy for him, she'd prove it wasn't worth the money he was getting paid. The guy just laughed, because the mansion needed a ton of wood, and there was no way a kid like Lenatus could handle that much. Besides, he figured she'd just run crying to Orty later, saying she was forced to chop wood, and he wasn't putting up with that. But the girl was beyond confident and decided to throw down the gauntlet with this cocky jerk. If she could chop more wood than him in 1 minute, he'd never criticize her work again. And if she lost, she agreed to give him 20% of her paycheck. Claire thought that was a crazy bet, but Lenatus told her to trust her. The money-grubbing dude agreed, and even promised that if he won, no one else would mess with her either. He was already gloating, saying that even if she begged and cried when she lost, he'd still be taking that cash. His best record is 12 logs a minute, and there's no way he's losing to some shorty like her. He was cracking up because he figured she couldn't even lift the axe, let alone chop wood. But neither he nor Claire knew that Lenatus was the strongest girl in the village. Now they're just staring, totally shocked at how skillfully she's splitting those logs. Meanwhile, Lord Theodore has drifted off into deep thought again. It was starting to worry his assistant a bit, but Theodore insisted he was fine. Still, Orty noticed something was up. The Duke's been staring at that book forever without turning a page. Suddenly, Theodore asked his assistant if he knew what a happy kimbap was. The guy was baffled. He'd never heard of it, and the Duke told him not to sweat it. Lenatus called him something like a kimbap recently, and he decided to ask her about it directly. He's just curious what's up. Now he's actually looking forward to tea time. Suddenly, he's super interested in what his sorceress does when she's not pouring his tea. Meanwhile, Lenatus completely wrecked that annoying jerk and proudly watched him squirm. The other servants cheered her on, even though nobody thought she could actually do it. They still can't believe it. She chopped 28 logs in a minute. Blondie Noah barely managed 10. Some suspected she was a witch, and others figured the girl was just naturally strong. And she, holding a log, demanded that the arrogant dude keep his promise. The guy, who was just acting all high and mighty, now couldn't figure out where such a frail girl got that strength. Anyway, she won the bet, and it was time for everyone to get back to their duties. Lenatus was just pissed that because of that pain in the butt, she couldn't even eat breakfast properly. To get a read on her mood, she crumbled a piece of firewood in her hand, which just made Noah even more anxious. The others started whispering, and Claire suggested they check out what was left in the dining hall and grab a bite. People were telling themselves Lenatus was just a person, not some witch, and she was hungry after work like the rest of them. On the way, Lenatus started whining about how much she wanted some fried rice with kimchi right now. Maybe because she was so starving, she was craving the food she used to eat back in a past life, like tteokbokki and bulgogi, and also kimchi stew. But Claire had no idea what kimchi even was. Lenatus only explained that it was the one thing that could make her happy right now. Then, a genius idea hit her. The Duke eats well, but she could give him something he's never had before. That'd definitely make him happy. and she decided to ask her friend for help with it. They immediately headed to the kitchen, even though Claire didn't get why they weren't going to the dining hall. After a bit, Lenatus brought the Duke a dish covered with this huge round lid. He figured it was tea time, but thought it was kind of weird serving tea like that. Lenatus explained it was a snack, practically a meal, but tea was ready for him too. Theodore was a little surprised, and she proudly announced she'd made it all herself, just for him. Then, with a flourish, she lifted the lid and wished the Duke a good appetite. Theodore took one look at the plate and was totally thrown. It was like nothing he'd ever seen. Hours earlier, Lenatus and Claire had hit the kitchen to whip up some Korean grub, all for Theodore. She suddenly realized kimchi, the stuff her mom and grandma always made back in her old life, didn't exist here. For bulgogi, you need that special sauce you buy, and Lenatus had no idea how to make it. That leaves tteokbokki, but you need chili sauce, and she ran into the exact same problem. Lenatus couldn't even imagine living in a place where you couldn't whip up one of these meals. They don't have the right stuff here. But then she remembered she could make some chicken. Doesn't have everything for that either, but she could just fry it up, which is still awesome. Claire got hyped with her friend, picturing how good that would taste. But then she remembered that Mr. Theodore hates fried food, so they barely ever make it. Lenatus thought that was weird, because it's so good, she even had some fried cod recently. And get this, you gotta ask the head chef for permission to even make it. Next up, spiced chicken, which they should have everything for. But then her hopes got crushed again, because they're out of hot sauce. Though instead of sauce, she could just add some red pepper powder and a little sugar for sweetness. And if you throw in some fried squid, bam! Lenatus' signature stew. That's exactly what she served Mr. Theodore, who was totally clueless what it was. Lenatus explained it was a special dish from her hometown, but the Duke didn't get what was so special about it. She also wanted to make some rabaki, but she can't cook rice cakes or noodles to save her life. But she was sure he'd absolutely love it, and even beg her to be his personal chef. Theodore, a little wary, decided to trust her, and, spearing a bit of vermicelli, brought it to his mouth. But after chewing for a second, he immediately coughed it up, declaring it was totally inedible. Lenatus' dream of becoming Theodore's head chef immediately shattered into a million pieces. He was supposed to be blown away by the taste and beg her to cook it for him forever. For the Duke, it was way too spicy and way too sweet, probably because of the pepper and sugar. Plus, the taste was like subtly honeyed, but with this fishy aftertaste, seriously weird. Lenatus was floored that the young master didn't dig her cooking. She'd put so much effort in, and now she was scared the Duke would think she was trying to poison him. But Theodore just calmly asked for tea, and Lenatus jumped right on it. Back in her room, grabbing the dish, she decided to taste test her own creation. Turns out, the flavor was totally nasty, just like the young master said. She couldn't figure out what went wrong. She'd put so much good stuff in there. Now, she was making a face from the taste of whatever that was. Thinking about it, Estella always did the cooking. Lenatus just supervised. Even back in her old life, she never cooked. Her mom or grandma always handled it. Her mom was a sweet, good person. Worked as a kindergarten teacher, dark eyebrows, double eyelids, and a dimple on one cheek. Her cute smile could sometimes look kinda sinister. Now, all Lenatus has left are memories, and she doesn't feel connected to her past life anymore. But thinking about her mom warms her up. It would be awesome if she could remember her mom from this world too. Estella says she's good, kind, super pretty, and looked like an angel when she was breastfeeding Lenatus. The girl doesn't remember any of that, and it makes her feel pretty bummed out. But on the bright side, she still has Estella, so not all is lost, and life's still pretty good. Plus, right now, she needs to make sure Theodore's happy. And since the stew was a total disaster, Lenatus decided to try something else. Now, she just needs to figure out what to do with this stew, which even the dogs probably wouldn't touch. And Theodore still had that taste lingering on his tongue, a taste he'd never try again. He knew he'd been served stew without even tasting it, and he was so awkward, he didn't even ask about the kimbap. This girl just kept getting weirder. She presented the food so proudly, waiting for him to appreciate the flavor. You could even see Lenatus trembling while she waited, and Theodorus actually found it kind of cute. He wondered if she'd gone to bed, or if she was cooking up something else again. Suddenly, he realized he actually wanted to see her, but a sinister voice from behind him, like a ghost from the past, reminded him that he was a monster, and she was a witch. Theodorus felt the icy fingers of his dread touching his neck, and the voice asked what he intended to do with this child. When he got bored, he wouldn't be able to help himself, and all his desire would end in bloodshed. The words his father spoke, that he couldn't escape his fate, made the Duke slam his fist against the glass. All his feelings hit him at once, and he felt his hands starting to shake again. He wouldn't dare mess with a girl who was still lost in thought about her cooking. Lenatus was super bummed that she couldn't make something healing out of delicious food. But then she suddenly remembered something from her past life, and even shouted, scaring the slime half to death. There's this one healing thing from farming, a special veggie. The next morning, Lenatus dragged Claire out to the garden to dig up the ingredient they needed. They dug up a ton of sweet potatoes in one go, and didn't get a scratch or even a speck of dirt on them. Lenatus hadn't been personally interested in this before, but she'd seen a lot of covers featuring healing farm products. Besides, Claire was in charge of the garden, so Lenatus easily found a job for herself there. She didn't particularly love farming, of course, but back in the village, she used to do hard labor, so she feels proud and satisfied when she harvests crops in such a clean field. Lenatus was loving it. She hadn't felt this good at work in ages. Sunshine, a gentle breeze in her hair. It's a real pleasure to work like this, even with the sweat and the smells. She even started thinking about farming as a way to heal. But that's just her personal therapy. All her worries vanish, and she just enjoys herself. Lenatus really did look happy, but then she realized this wouldn't heal the Duke. Her face started to freak out again, and it clearly scared her friend. Theodore's a nobleman. There's no way he'd do something like this. He just strolls around the garden, looking elegant, checking out what's gonna end up on his plate. That dude hasn't even gotten his hands dirty with dust. It's crazy to ask him to work on a farm. He'd sooner rip your head off than agree. Claire saw her friend's mood plummet, and she got really worried. And she was practically in tears, clueless about what to do, when Sir Instrid just happened to notice. He saw her toiling in the garden and figured she was feeling sick because it was so damn hot out. So, he brought her back inside and asked her why she wasn't taking a break. Lenatus got a total deja vu vibe. Orty had said the same thing about her never leaving the mansion. But the knight repeated that rest was essential, and all the workers took turns resting. The girl was actually exhausted by this point, and Instrid even suggested she take a day off. It'd be fine if she went for a walk outside the mansion. Theodore's been sleeping great these days, so no worries. Lenatus was surprised. She thought he was plagued by nightmares, and now she didn't know why she was working so hard to heal him. Even though her own body can recover in like 2 hours, it's not the same as those heroines who are all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed in the morning. The knight encouraged her, saying work's good, but rest is important too, and then he left her room. Lenatus was still trying to figure out why Instrid came to her just for that, especially since her first impression of the guy was pretty bad. But now she saw he was actually kind of considerate, and then he almost ran into Claire leaving her room. The girl got spooked, mostly from the surprise, but the knight was curious why she yelped. Lenatus could hear their conversation in her room, and now she realized he wasn't that considerate after all. The girl even felt bad for her friend, who was apologizing to the knight in a shaky voice for freaking out. Lenatus couldn't just stand by in a situation like that, so she went out there to see what was going on. But what she saw just totally blew her away. Instrid wasn't about to yell at the maid at all. Instead, he gently touched her head, and then he asked her to be more careful next time, and just walked off without looking back. Suddenly, Lenatus was acting like some romance novel fanatic from my past life. Claire, though, saw it as a warning, like next time, he'd rip her freaking head off. Lenatus tried to calm her down, explaining the knight was just patting her hand to encourage her. But she wouldn't chill, thinking he was gonna break her arm, even though she did nothing wrong. While she was freaking out with these crazy scenarios, Lenatus asked her what she wanted. That snapped Claire out of it, and in a way more cheerful voice, she confessed she had a favor to ask. Claire's request was simple. She needed help getting a fire going in the fireplace, but for some reason, the fire wouldn't light right, and it was seriously ticking Lenatus off. Plus, the fireplace was in Theodore's room, and Claire asked them to take turns lighting it. It was Lenatus's turn now, and she figured she could get it done before the young master got back to his room. This fire would be perfect for roasting some sweet potatoes, but now's not the time. She muttered about how much she wanted to sneak some and eat them when she heard the Duke's voice. The same Duke she was just eating. I can't even tell you how scared Lenatus got in that moment. It was like her soul jumped out, ran around the whole estate, and came right back. And Theodore just calmly pointed out that starting a fire was definitely not part of her job. Then he asked who even told her to do it, since she's got completely different responsibilities. But that question totally stumped her. She had no idea what the Duke was actually getting at.